Hebrews 10, section 5, Christ as the burnt offering. Hebrews 10, 5 through 9. Wherefore, when he comes into the world, this is Christ, he says, sacrificing and offering you would not, but a body hast thou prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you had no pleasure. Then said I come. In the volume of the book it is written of me, to do thy will, O God. Above, when he said, sacrifice and offering and burnt offerings and offerings for sin thou wouldst not, neither hadst pleasure therein, which are offered by the law. Then he said, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He takes away the first, that he may establish the second. By the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. This is a complicated passage. He takes away the, quote, first, which is carnal ordinances, the law and its sacrifices, that he may establish the, quote, second. What is the second? It is his will. He says, sacrifices and offerings you did not want, you didn't have pleasure in them, but I come to do thy will. Jesus did make himself an offering for sin, and it was an act of obedience. Romans 5:19 says, through his one act of obedience, we were made righteous. We were made righteous through his single act of obedience, which is his death on the cross for sin. However, there's a deeper aspect of the sacrifice of Christ than just the sin offering. You may remember from Leviticus that there was the burnt offering, the meal offering, the peace offering, the trespass offering, and the sin offering. Each of these typified different aspects of the death of Christ. Not all of it was related only to sin. The burnt offering was very special and shows us a deeper way of looking at Christ's offering as a pleasing fragrance to God. The burnt offering is the base for all the other offerings. In the burnt offering, there's a memorial that goes up before God at all times. It is a sweet fragrance unto God, and it is entirely for him. Leviticus 1:5. And he shall kill the bullock before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood round about the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he shall flay the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. And the sons of Aaron and the priests shall put fire on the altar, and lay the wood in order upon the fire. And the priests, Aaron's sons, shall lay the parts, the head, the fat, in order upon the wood that is on the fire which is upon the altar. But his inward parts and his legs he shall wash with water. And the priest shall burn all on the altar, to be a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet savor to the Lord. In verse 6, we see that the burnt offering was flayed, exposing the inward parts. God drew near to this offering almost as if he was inspecting it. When he talks about the burnt offering, it's clear that it was completely for God's satisfaction because it represents Jesus in his body, living from start to finish entirely for the glory of his Father. He said in John, the Son is in the bosom of the Father. The Greek word there is into. The Son is into the bosom of the Father, which means Jesus is always inclining into the bosom of the Father. In John, we see that Jesus lived entirely for the glory of the Father. Every thought, every intention of his heart, every feeling, every response was to the glory of the Father, who moved within him to the point where he said, when you have seen me, you've seen the Father. He expressed him perfectly, and he said, I live because of the Father, John 6:57. He also said, believe that when I speak, it is not I speaking, but the Father who works in me, John 14:10. Every word he spoke was the Father working in him, because inwardly he was entirely inclined to the Father at all times. He lived entirely for the glory of the Father. The burnt offering is entirely for God's satisfaction. The priests had no portion of it. It was entirely for God to be consumed as it lifts up its fragrance. The burnt offering is always burning. Without it, you could not have the other offerings. It was required first, which is why it is listed first in Leviticus. We are talking about the beloved Son who always does that which is pleasing in his Father's sight. And that is the only reason the sin offering was even accepted. Why did he accept the offering for sin? Because he loves righteousness and hates iniquity, and because of that, Jesus is so pleasing to God. He loves the Father, and the Father loves him. There's a communion there, a fellowship that is unbroken, entire, and stretches into eternity and forever. There is this fragrance from Christ going up to God, and it is so pleasing that it causes God to draw near to that sacrifice. When Paul says we are a fragrance of Christ to God, 2 Corinthians 2:15, that is the reference to the burnt offering. He is in us as a fragrance going up to the Father. Someone said to me yesterday as a word of comfort, "You're the Father's favorite." It sounds silly, but it rang true because we have Christ in us. He's a fragrance going up to God. With his righteousness imputed to us, it is literally that kind of living that is reckoned as ours, as if we had that kind of history. You have no idea how pleased the Father is with you because you have the fragrance of Christ. When you come to him, it is Christ in you. So this is the will of God. On the one hand, the Father did not take pleasure in having to offer his Son for sin, yet on the other hand, Isaiah says he was pleased to bruise him, and he was bruised for our iniquities. Isaiah 53:10 and 5. Here Hebrews says it is not sacrifices and offering under the law that pleased him, that's for sure. But even more, what is really in view here is this one who said, "Behold, I come. In the volume of the book it is written of me. I come to do thy will, O God." This is how he lived as a man. Hebrews 10:9 says, "He takes away the first, that he may establish the second." He takes away the first, the whole carnal system of ordinances, and replaces it with what? This person. This person who lives to do the will of God, not only in his earthly body. That was just a preparation, as we've seen, for him to take over the high priestly ministry of Melchizedek, to bring many sons into glory. He laid himself down to be the perpetual, eternal shepherd of the sheep. He took away the first to establish Christ himself as everything to us. All of this is the will of God the Father. So what can you do? You can do nothing but enjoy this one in whom the Father is well pleased. That is what it means to serve the living God. To be perfected is just to increase in the knowledge of Jesus and what he's done for you, and how secure you are in the basis of how he pleases the Father.